I never thought a school field trip could leave me with nightmares that would still claw at my mind years later. I'm older now, and most of my friends laugh off the story whenever I try to tell it, but I know what I saw, what I felt. The memory is carved into me like an old scar. It wasn't just childish fear, or my imagination playing tricks. Something happened on that trip, something that doesn't belong in this world. It was the fall of my sophomore year. Our chorus class had a trip planned to a lodge-style resort tucked away in the Pennsylvania woods. It was called Maple Hollow Retreat, and the place was one of those sprawling campgrounds with cabins, activity centers, and a lake that caught the reflection of the moon like a mirror. When our bus finally pulled into the gravel lot, the trees on both sides leaned over us, the last of their brown and orange leaves clinging desperately to the branches. The sky was already darkening even though it was barely past 4 in the afternoon. Everyone was excited. Trips like these were a break from routine. 3 days without homework, away from parents, with just enough supervision to stop us from doing anything too stupid. I was rooming with my best friend Tyler, and 2 other guys we sort of knew but weren't that close with. Our cabin was one of the smaller ones, ground level, with a sliding glass door that opened up to a back patio facing the lake. Inside there were 2 twin-size bunk beds, a bathroom that smelled faintly of bleach, and a wall heater that rattled like it was barely holding on. The first day went the way you'd expect. Go-karting, indoor rock climbing, greasy cafeteria food, and awkward flirting with a couple of girls Tyler and I had been talking to. We were exhausted by the time we trudged back to the cabin around 10 that night. I remember the lake was still, eerily still, as we walked up the path. The reflection of the moon shimmered off the black surface, and every so often a cold wind would ripple the water. For some reason, Tyler left the blinds on the sliding door wide open. He said he liked the moonlight shining in, that it made the room feel less like a box. At the time, I didn't care. I just wanted to sleep. We all talked and laughed for a while, lying in our bunks, tossing jokes across the dark room. Around midnight, the other 2 guys passed out, leaving Tyler and me whispering about dumb things, music, classes, which girls we thought were cute. I was drifting into that half-sleep where words stopped making sense, when suddenly Tyler went silent. Then he screamed. Not a playful yell, not a jump scare kind of noise, but a full, terrified scream that ripped me from my bunk. My heart slammed into my ribs. "What the hell, man?" I hissed, scrambling upright. He was sitting bolt upright in his bed, his eyes fixed on the sliding door. And then I saw her. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, just shadows cast by the trees. But no. There was a woman standing there, tall, disturbingly thin, her hair hanging in grayish strands down to her chest. Her hands were pressed flat against the glass, framing her face as she peered inside. Her face, I can still see it. Pale skin stretched tight, eyes wide but glassy, like she wasn't really looking at us but through us. I froze. My brain scrambled to come up with any explanation. Maybe she was part of the staff? A late-night groundskeeper? Maybe some hiker wandered onto the property? But even then, why would she be staring into our cabin like that? Before I could say anything, she turned. No sudden movement, just a slow pivot, and then she drifted out of view, her thin frame swallowed by the darkness outside. Tyler and I looked at each other, both waiting for the other to speak. Neither of us moved. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the heater. Finally, Tyler whispered, "Did you see her?" I nodded. Yeah. We worked up the nerve to check outside, sliding the door open just enough to peek our heads out. Nothing. The stone pathway was empty. The grass glistened with dew, untouched. Not a sound but the rustle of leaves in the wind. We shut the door, locked it, and sat awake for hours, listening, waiting. The next morning, the other 2 guys teased us for being pussies when we told them. They swore we were making it up. We tried telling the girls we'd been hanging with, but they just laughed nervously and said we were trying too hard to scare them. By evening, I convinced myself maybe they were right. Maybe it had been a shadow, or our tired brains playing tricks. That night, we closed the blinds. Tyler fell asleep fast, but I couldn't. My nerves wouldn't settle. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind outside set my teeth on edge. I tried to count my breaths, tried to focus on the steady rhythm until I finally felt sleep dragging me under. Something woke me. I don't know what it was. No sound, no movement I could remember. Just a feeling. A weight pressing down on me, pulling me back to awareness. I lay there in the dark, staring at the sliver of moonlight cutting through the blinds. My mouth was dry. My body refused to move. I turned my head slowly toward Tyler's bed, but I couldn't see him. Something blocked my view. A tall, looming shadow stood between our beds. My heart stuttered as my eyes adjusted, pulling the shape into focus. It was her. The woman. She was standing right over me, her head bent at an unnatural angle, watching. I could smell her breath, sour, damp, like mold. Her hands hung at her sides, twitching slightly, and then in a low rasp she said, "Your door was unlocked." I wanted to scream, to move, to run, but my body was paralyzed. All I could do was watch as she took 2 slow steps backward, turned and slipped out through the sliding door. The blinds. They were open again. I don't remember unlocking that door. I don't remember anyone touching it. I shot up, shaking Tyler awake. He cursed at me until he saw my face, pale and drenched in sweat. I stammered through what I'd seen, and together we ran to the door, locked it, yanked the blind shut, and shoved a chair against the handle for good measure. We sat awake until dawn, too terrified to speak. At breakfast, we finally told one of the chaperones. She brushed it off, said maybe it was just another guest, someone drunk who got lost. When we insisted, she told us not to scare the other students and dropped it. But that afternoon, Tyler and I saw her again, through the window of the cabin next to ours. She was sitting perfectly straight on one of the beds, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the door, just waiting, and she wasn't alone. There was a man in the room too, older, gray-haired, staring up at the ceiling like he was lost in thought. Neither of them moved when staff finally went to check. Neither of them spoke. The staff muttered something about mental health issues, said they couldn't legally remove them. That night, our trip ended early. The teachers insisted it was because of scheduling issues, but I know the truth. We all packed up and boarded the bus, leaving Maple Hollow behind. When we pulled away, I dared to look back, and I swear I saw her, standing by the lake, hands hanging at her sides, staring as our bus rolled down the gravel road. That was years ago. I've stayed in hotels, cabins, even camps since then, but I never sleep with the blinds open anymore, because every time I close my eyes, I see her face against the glass. And sometimes when I wake in the dead of night, I swear I can still hear her voice whispering in the dark, "Your door was unlocked." When I was in the 4th grade, my class went on a field trip to a small privately owned zoo about an hour away from our school. It wasn't anything like the big city zoos, no lions or elephants or polar bears. This was a rural attraction, a kind of family-run place that focused on smaller animals, goats, llamas, some birds of prey, a few reptile enclosures. There was also a big red barn converted into a museum filled with taxidermied animals and random exhibits, like old farming equipment and dusty dioramas. I remember the day vividly. The sky was overcast, gray clouds sagging low and heavy, and a damp chill hung in the air. The kind of weather where everything looks just a little darker, a little more lifeless. My classmates were buzzing with excitement, glad to be out of school, and our teachers struggled to keep us all together as we filed into the barn for the first part of the tour. Inside, the lighting was dim, casting long shadows down the hallways. The red carpeting muffled our footsteps, and the air smelled faintly of mothballs and something sour like wet fur. Stuffed animals stared at us from glass cases. Foxes frozen mid-pounce, owls with glassy yellow eyes. Even a bear reared up on its hind legs. For most of the kids, it was just neat or silly, but I was always different. Quiet, a little off, as my mom used to say. I liked wandering away from the group, getting lost in my own head. That's exactly what I did that day. When the group paused near a large display of taxidermied deer, I slipped into the bathroom. I didn't tell anyone. I thought I'd catch up after. The bathroom was dimly lit too, with one flickering fluorescent bulb buzzing overhead. I washed my hands and stepped back into the hallway. Silence greeted me. The group was gone. I should have hurried to find them, but something drew me further down the corridor toward the parts of the building we hadn't toured yet. The carpeting seemed darker here, almost brown instead of red, and the air was colder. The glass-eyed animals stared at me as I walked past. Their shadows stretched unnaturally long across the floor. That's when I saw him. a man crouching behind a stack of folded chairs at the end of the hall. For a moment, I thought he was part of the staff, maybe fixing something. I even laughed nervously, thinking he was hiding as a joke. But when he stepped out from behind the chairs, my stomach dropped. He was tall, with a messy beard and clothes that looked too dirty, too worn for someone who worked there. His eyes were fixed on me in a way that made my skin crawl. Too wide, too intent. "Where'd the group go?" he asked. His voice was low, flat, almost rehearsed. I don't know," I muttered. He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes, and reached out to take my hand. His grip was tight, rough. "Come on, I'll help you find them." Every instinct in me screamed to pull away, but I didn't. I let him lead me down the hall, my mind foggy, confused. He pushed open a side exit door, and suddenly we were outside, in a back lot behind the barn. The air was colder here, and the smell of dumpsters hung thick. A couple of wooden benches sat crooked on the cracked pavement, and beyond them was a stretch of woods. That's when his grip changed. He yanked my arm hard, pulling me toward the trees. His smile vanished, replaced with something darker, hungrier. My feet stumbled over the cracked pavement as he dragged me. I didn't scream. I don't know why. Maybe I was too shocked. Maybe fear stole my voice. But inside I was panicking. My stomach twisted so violently I thought I'd throw up, and then salvation, a scream, but not mine. "Hey!" It was one of my teachers, a woman, her voice sharp and furious, cutting through the air like a blade. She was on the other side of the chain-link fence that bordered the property. The man froze. His grip on my arm tightened painfully, then released. Without a word, he turned and bolted into the woods, his figure vanishing between the trees. I stood there shaking, staring at the spot where he'd disappeared. Moments later, more teachers came rushing out through the side door, their faces pale with shock. One of them grabbed me, pulling me into a tight hug, scolding me and comforting me all at once. They herded me back inside, where my classmates stared, whispering. The rest of the day was a blur. My parents were called. The police showed up, though I don't remember what they said. The trip ended early, and we all piled back onto the buses to head home. I thought it was over. But as the bus rumbled out of the zoo's parking lot, I looked out the window and I saw him, the man. He was crouched low in the trees, near the side of the road, half hidden behind a branch. His eyes locked on the buses as they passed, unblinking, watching. I opened my mouth to tell someone, anyone, but the words never came out. My throat closed up. Maybe I was too scared. Maybe I was too ashamed. All I could do was sit there trembling as the man disappeared into the distance. For years, I kept that secret. I never told anyone I'd seen him again. I tried to convince myself maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe my brain was just filling in shadows. But the older I got, the more I realized how wrong that day had been. He hadn't been staff. He hadn't been some random lost visitor. He had been waiting in those dark halls for some dumb kid like me to wander off. And sometimes, late at night, when I walk past windows or glance into the woods near my house, I swear I still see him crouched low, watching, waiting. When I was in high school, our history teacher, Mr. Jameson, organized a field trip to a place I had never heard of before, an educational heritage site about 45 minutes outside of town. It wasn't one of those polished tourist attractions with gift shops and guides in costumes. It was a crumbling, half-forgotten village. Rows of leaning wooden houses, broken fences, and overgrown paths swallowed by weeds. Supposedly, it had once been a thriving little mining settlement in the late 1800s, before the mine collapsed and the residents abandoned it. Most kids groaned when they heard about it. They wanted a trip to the city museum or anywhere less boring, but I didn't mind. Something about ghost towns fascinated me. The day we went, the weather was weird. It was late fall, the trees mostly bare, and the sky was a dull sheet of white. The kind of sky that feels heavy, pressing down on everything. We arrived in 2 yellow buses, the tires crunching over gravel as we pulled up to a crooked wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Cold Creek Village." The air smelled of wet leaves and rust. "Stay in groups," Mr. Jameson warned as we unloaded. "No wandering off. The ground here is unstable and some of the buildings aren't safe." Of course, that was like an open invitation for us to do the opposite. At first, it was fun. We laughed and dared each other to peek into the dark windows of the houses. The air inside was stale and sour like mold and ashes. Old furniture sat rotting, and in one house I found a cracked baby crib with a filthy rag still inside it. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. The sound of our classmates faded, and the silence of the abandoned village closed in. The only noises were the crunch of our shoes on the leaf-littered ground and the occasional creak of wood shifting in the wind. That's when we noticed it, a door slowly closing on its own. At first, we thought it was just the wind, but then another one slammed shut in a different house. We exchanged nervous glances. Probably Mr. Jameson messing with us, someone whispered. I wanted to believe that, but the longer I stood there, the heavier the air felt. It wasn't just empty. It felt occupied, like the houses were watching. We kept moving, our group smaller now, just me, my friend Tyler, and a girl named Amber who tagged along. The path took us to the old church at the far end of the village. It was in better condition than the houses, though the white paint had peeled to gray and the steeple leaned unnervingly. The front door stood ajar. Against my better judgment, we went inside. The pews were warped but still standing, and the altar was intact. Dust swirled in the pale light that filtered through broken stained glass windows. The air was colder here, so cold I could see my breath even though it wasn't that cold outside. And then we heard it. A voice. Low, whispering, coming from the back of the church. We froze. Tyler tried to laugh it off. Probably some other kids, he muttered, but his voice shook. The whispering grew louder, clearer. It wasn't English. The syllables were harsh, guttural. Old Amber grabbed my arm. Let's go. We backed toward the doors, but before we reached them, they slammed shut with a thunderous crack. The whispering stopped. And then from the shadows near the altar, something moved. At first I thought it was a person, but its proportions were wrong. Too tall, too thin, its limbs bending strangely as it stepped forward. Its face was pale, stretched, featureless except for two hollow pits where eyes should have been. We bolted. The doors didn't resist this time. We shoved them open and sprinted into the gray daylight, our breaths ragged, hearts hammering. We didn't stop running until we reached the main path where we finally saw other students and teachers gathered, but none of them seemed to notice anything wrong. The village looked normal again. Still, quiet, abandoned. Tyler tried to tell Mr. Jameson what we'd seen, but the teacher just scolded us for wandering off. The rest of the trip passed in a blur. I stayed close to the group, refusing to look back at the church. When we finally got back on the buses and pulled away, I pressed my face to the window. The trees blurred past and Cold Creek Village disappeared from sight. But just before it vanished completely, I saw the steeple, and in the broken window of the church, I swear something was standing there, watching us leave. That night I dreamed of whispering, harsh guttural words I didn't understand. When I woke up, my throat hurt raw as if I'd been whispering them in my sleep. And sometimes, even now, when the house is dark and still, I hear them again, whispering at the edges of the silence, calling me back to that village that should have stayed forgotten.